And just so everyone is aware, we are recording the meeting today. So I think we've got everyone who will be with us. A few folks may join, but we can go ahead and get started. So welcome to this online information session for the Solar Assistance Program. And this program helps people who own commercial and large residential buildings install solar on their buildings. Next slide, please. So I'm Brad Pillen, Energy Engagement Planner with the City of Cambridge, joined by Megan Shaw from the city, and as well as a few folks from our partner in this program, Resonant Energy, Sana Wright, Madeline Barr, and Rachel Gentile. And as I said a moment ago, this meeting is being recorded, and we will share the recording to the City of Cambridge YouTube page following the session as well. So we are going to make sure we have time for questions. We'll set aside time at the end where if you want to actually just raise your hand and come off of mute, you can ask questions. However, we also encourage you to ask questions or submit comments throughout the presentation using the Q&A button that's in the toolbar. And if you don't see it listed with the other actions on the toolbar, there should be a button that says more with 3 dots, and you should see Q&A there. So please feel free just to submit questions at any time there. If it's relatively straightforward, we might answer it during the presentation, but we'll still make sure that we re-ask it at the end, just so everyone can hear the question and the answer. And then if you have any questions that you think of following the presentation, you're also encouraged to reach out to the program email address, which is cambridgesolar@resonant.energy. So let's just start just sharing a bit about who this program is for. So the Solar Assistance Program is for property owners for commercial or large residential buildings in Cambridge. And we'll go into a little bit more specifics about what is meant by large buildings as we go on. And this could be, if you've already started to explore solar and you have some idea of what sort of like ownership pathway you're looking for. You can still engage with this program already having started the process. We're happy to sort of pick things up with where you are, help get you over the finish line and share some more information about what this program might offer that maybe you haven't received elsewhere. And if you're also just getting started, welcome. We're happy that you're here and we can start from scratch and help you understand what options could exist for your building for solar. And if you don't meet the criteria for this program, mostly meaning that if your building is not quite large enough to participate, you still have a resource available to you, which is Energy Sage. So you can go to energysage.com/p/Cambridge, and you can put in your building address and you can still receive quotes and information about solar that could be a good fit for your building. So again, this program is really designed to work with larger buildings because there are just some more complexities that come from working with larger commercial buildings or multifamily buildings. So that's who we're trying to address here. And just a few other city-supported programs and resources that can both help you save energy and lower your energy costs. We always encourage anyone to sign up for a no-cost mass save energy assessment, whether it's for a home or if it's for a small business or commercial property. You can also opt up to 100% Green Plus in the city's community electricity program. So all electricity accounts when they're opened are enrolled in the city's community electricity program in the standard green tier. So you also have the option to opt up to 100% Green Plus to use all renewable energy. And that's at a cost that's about 1 cent more per kilowatt hour than the standard green offering, so still very competitive and affordable. Anyone with an electricity account can also save money by enrolling in a community solar project. One thing that we'll talk about in this presentation is hosting community solar. So there's a difference between hosting and being a subscriber to a community solar project. So even if you cannot put solar on your roof, anyone, as long as you pay an electricity account, can still enroll in a community solar project and receive some of the savings that come along with that. And then finally, to access these programs or any other programs or types of support that you might be looking for, residential or small business energy programs, we encourage you to call the Cambridge Energy Helpline, and that phone number is 617-430-6230, and that helpline is supported by our partners from All In Energy. And so I'm going to pass it off over to Sana Wright from our partner in this program at Resonant Energy.
Thanks, Brad. Excited to be here, and thank you to everyone who's joined us today. I'll start by introducing myself. I'll be the facilitator today. My name is Sana. I'm the Community Partnerships Manager at Resonant Energy. I have a background in urban planning and stakeholder engagement, specifically around renewable energy. And I manage our partnerships and programs that help educate and expand access to solar across the state. I'm a Cambridge native, so I'm super excited to be supporting this program and will, in all likelihood, be familiar with your building. I'm joined by my colleagues at Resonant Energy, Madeline and Rachel, who are here to help answer questions throughout the presentation and also after when we open the floor up to Q&A. So here's the agenda for today. I will talk a little bit more about Resonant Energy, as well as the Solar Assistance Program. Then I'll dive into the benefits of solar and the state and federal incentives that you'd be able to take advantage of by installing solar. And then we'll wrap up with a more detailed overview of the program and get all your questions answered. So who is Resonant Energy? We are a local full-service solar developer, and we're honored to have been selected through a competitive RFP process to be the city's official partner in this program. We were founded with a mission to increase access to clean energy, and we do that by helping nonprofit organizations, houses of worship, schools, small businesses, multifamily affordable housing developments go solar and take advantage of the available financing and funding opportunities that can otherwise feel difficult to pursue. We are B Corp certified and employee owned, and our office is based in Boston. We work all over the state, have done a few projects in New York as well. We've installed over 300 projects for individual organizations. Here are some that you might recognize in the Cambridge-Boston area. The Cambridge Redevelopment Authority, it's a nonprofit organization located right in Central Square. We've also installed solar for Christ Church in Harvard Square, and then as well for one of homeowners' rehab buildings. That's a affordable housing developer based in Cambridge. The building pictured here is in Inman, but we've installed and turned on over 35 systems for their development so far, with more turning on at the end of this year. And then we also installed solar for the Windsor School, which is an all-girls school in Boston. This one was particularly exciting because it was a student-led project. And then recently, of course, we've launched the Solar Assistance Program with the City of Cambridge after being selected as their official partner. And this program helps property owners understand their building's cost savings potential through solar and makes solar more accessible by offering easy and flexible installation pathways that I'll get into the details of later. The goal of this program is to help property owners capture the financial benefits of solar while also contributing to the city's goal of net zero by 2050. And as a participant, you'll receive a no-cost solar feasibility analysis for your building or building portfolio, depending on how many sites you own. And that feasibility analysis includes a review of those installation pathways, including no-cost options, as well as detailed cash flows that outline all the associated costs and savings of going solar. And then if you do decide to go solar after participating in this program, you can proceed seamlessly with installation through us. Just for some background, Cambridge has already made good progress towards their clean energy goals, but there is still some ways to go. Part of their net zero action plan is to install 50 megawatts of solar by 2030, and we are currently about 20% of the way there. So we're hoping that this program helps increase that percentage. Part of the challenge has been due to the fact that Cambridge faces some unique barriers to installing solar. Specifically, there are lots of dense, shady rooftops, lots of multifamily buildings with many owners. as well as lots of renter-occupied units where property owners don't pay electricity costs and therefore may not be incentivized to install solar. So the Solar Assistance Program is intended to support property owners through these challenges and give everyone a chance to contribute to a cleaner, more affordable, and resilient city. Before we dive into more details about the program, you may be asking yourself, why consider solar at all right now? Especially when there are many other projects you could be spending your time on, and things might be feeling pretty uncertain right now. So I thought I'd take some time to highlight some of the reasons our clients and partners are continuing to go solar. For one, the cost of electricity is consistently on the rise, and this is particularly the case in Massachusetts. You can see in this graph here from the US Energy Information Administration that there is not only a clear upward trend in average electricity prices in Massachusetts, but that Massachusetts electricity prices are significantly higher than the national average. This is in large part because the state continues to rely on oil and gas, which are imported and therefore subject to inflation and unpredictable price spikes that are spurred by tariffs and global events. And as it currently stands, Massachusetts does indeed have some of the most expensive electricity in the country. And the Boston area is ranked in the top 5 for energy burden, which means that residents are spending high percentages of their income on electricity costs. And under the new administration, the cost of electricity is expected to rise more quickly than before. But then on the other hand, Massachusetts stands out in another way. We have some of the best solar incentives in the state, which likely explains why, on the whole, solar deployment is relatively high. And not to mention, solar is a reliable way to protect against the increasing costs and price spikes highlighted in the last slide. The leading program in Massachusetts is called SMART, which has been named one of the best in the country. SMART offers cash payments to anyone who owns a solar system. And when you participate in this program, the cash flow will outline how this incentive factors into your overall costs and savings. And a new iteration of SMART with better incentives called SMART 3 is rolling out this year. So now is a great time to get at the top of the queue. And in addition to SMART, there are other state grants, including LISP and Solar for All, which if you decide to proceed with solar, we can help you apply for to cover the cost of installation. So here's what we tend to see when a building goes solar. Installing solar means you are no longer reliant on oil or gas or other imported fuels, and instead you are what we like to call energy self-sufficient, meaning you produce clean energy on site that is insulated from inflation, from tariffs, from price spikes. And this increased resiliency saves buildings typically 40 to 100% on their electricity bills and allows them to direct more money elsewhere. So let's look at some concrete examples of past clients. One of our clients, this synagogue in Auburndale, went solar in 2018. And since then, electricity costs have risen twice as quickly as they did in the 15 years prior to their install. And so as a result, this house of worship will actually save $172,000 more on their operating costs than we predicted when we first did their solar feasibility analysis. And without solar, they would have paid Eversource or their utility $800,000 in electricity costs over the system's 25-year lifetime. And then another good example, we installed a parking canopy for a client in Acton. Pre-solar in November 2021, they had an electricity bill of nearly $1,400. And then in December of 2024, after they installed solar, they covered all their electricity needs with solar and did not have to pay anything. So now that you have an idea of what impact solar can have for your building, I'll talk a little bit more about what incentives are available to you right now that this program specifically can help you understand. At the federal level, the Inflation Reduction Act, also known as the IRA, offers some strong incentives for solar. It was passed under the Biden administration in 2022, and it has made the transition to solar a lot more attractive for nonprofits in particular, who previously could not capture that tax credit. The highlights of the IRA are that it increased the tax credit that was set to sunset from 22% to 30% and signed it into law for the next 10 years. And it also allows additional tax credits above this 30% to be received for projects in environmental justice and low-income communities. And then, as I mentioned, it allows tax-exempt organizations to claim that tax credit as a check reimbursement from the IRS through a process called elective pay. What's great about this updated 30% tax credit is that the tax eligible basis has expanded to include all upfront costs of solar, including things like utility work. This is a list of the specific categories that are now eligible for reimbursement, but the key takeaway here is that because all upfront costs of installing solar are now eligible, you'll receive a reimbursement on a much larger sum. And these are the 5 environmental justice adders that are included in the IRA, which allow additional tax credits above the 30% to be received for projects located in or serving environmental justice and low-income communities. And so if your project is eligible for these adders, we will include that in the cash flow and support you through the application process. I believe we've submitted over 150 applications so far this year on behalf of our clients, and we're super excited that many of them have already been approved by the IRS. And you may be wondering whether everything I just talked about will remain in effect under the new administration. This is something we have considered and are tracking closely. There is some uncertainty at the federal level, particularly around those bonus tax credit adders that I just mentioned, but the 30% base tax credit is very likely to stay in place. It has precedent in previous administrations, including Trump's first presidency, and is supported by many Republican senators. And in addition to that, all state incentives, including SMART, will also stay in place. And just generally, as things shift, we maintain our commitment to helping you capture all the incentives available to you in the current moment. Here's just an example of one of our clients in the area, the East Boston Neighborhood Health Center, that received this 30% tax credit as a nonprofit. They purchased a 147 kilowatt system that covers 70% of their electricity usage for a projected total of more than $700,000 in lifetime cost savings. The system cost them a bit over $400,000 upfront, but they were able to get 30% of it reimbursed and ultimately spent only around $290,000 on the system. And given this, they will break even in 8 years. That's just to give you a bit of a picture of what that might look like for a system of this size. So now that you all are solar incentive experts, let's dive into program details. What exactly does the Solar Assistance Program offer? The program's primary offering is a no-cost solar feasibility analysis for commercial buildings in Cambridge so that property owners can make informed decisions about solar without having to worry about upfront costs. The feasibility analysis includes a review of several different installation pathways that are intended to make solar work for everyone, and a detailed cash flow for the system's 25-year lifetime that shows how all the incentives I just talked about, like SMART and the federal tax credit, factor into your costs and savings. On the next slides, I'll talk through these installation pathways and an example cash flow. Here are the 3 installation pathways offered through this program. You can choose to explore just one or all 3, depending on your budget and priorities. Direct ownership is our most straightforward option. This means that you buy the system outright. You receive all the state and federal incentives discussed, and you see the highest long-term savings. And then for organizations that are unable to make that upfront investment, we can work with a third-party financer to fund the system instead. And so you wouldn't be responsible for any of the costs or maintenance associated with the system, but would instead enter into an agreement called a power purchase agreement with the financer to purchase some of the electricity produced by the system at a discounted rate. And so over time, you'll still save plenty of money on your electricity bills. And then lastly, this was the option that Brad discussed briefly. If you have a larger roof, you can choose to host a community solar system on your roof and send clean energy credits to low-income customers. In this case, you are also not responsible for any costs or maintenance associated with the system, but instead of purchasing some of the energy produced by the system, you'll simply receive a monthly lease payment for hosting. So this is a very sort of hands-off approach. And this is an example of the cash flow or a cash flow for the direct ownership option. To start just showing only the first year here. In this case, the electricity generated, you see in yellow by the solar system, is used directly by you. And so in doing so, you save on your utility costs, which you can see here in blue in the second group of columns. And then additional revenue comes from the various incentives I talked about, like SMART and green, which after 10 years transitions to another incentive called REX, which you'll see in the next column, and then, of course, the federal tax credit in blue there. And then we add all these savings together and subtract in gray the estimated insurance and operations and maintenance costs to get the total annual benefit. And then on the next slide, you can see how this sort of plays out over 25 years. You'll see clearly when you'll break even. In the case of this client, that was after 4 years. And then you'll also see how much money is saved in total at the end of the system's 25-year lifetime, which in this case is about $240,000. So if you want to get started with the feasibility analysis and see what this cash flow would look like for your building, here's how that would work. You would fill out the interest form or reach out to us directly. I'll share the information for both the interest form and our email on the last slide. And then assuming you qualify, we'll set up an introductory call with you to learn more about your building and your solar priorities. Once we determine those, we'll need you to share some basic building information with us, including roof ages and the latest electricity bills for your buildings. This is what we need to complete a thorough feasibility analysis. Then when we do an analysis, we'll run different design and financing arrangements depending on that conversation, and model the value of the solar produced based on whether you're using it on site or sending it to an off-site bill, the size of the array, where it's located, all those variables. And then we'll wrap in the state and federal incentives and present a pathway that delivers the highest savings and is also in closest alignment with your building's priorities. So in this sense, the proposal that you get out of doing this solar feasibility analysis with us is very much a custom one. And we'll do this for each of your sites and review everything with you in depth over an hour-long meeting. And then after you've received your proposal, we hope that you'll proceed with solar, though that's not a requirement for participating in this program. And at this point, we can help you apply for additional grant funding to help cover the cost of your system if you're going the direct ownership route, for example. And before we open up the floor to questions, I figured I would cover some FAQs. You might be wondering who's eligible to participate in this program. Brad mentioned some alternatives for those who are not eligible, but the program is designed for owners of commercial and large residential buildings in Cambridge. So if you qualify, if you fit into that category, fill out a form. If not, if you're unsure, you can reach out to us and we can point you in the right direction. You may also be wondering, how large does your roof need to be? If you're assessing just one building, we require a 25 kilowatt minimum, which probably doesn't mean too much to you all, but that's roughly 25,000 square feet, or the size of a large single family home. For portfolios, for example, if you have multiple sites that you want to explore solar for, we can work with slightly smaller roofs. So there's some flexibility there. Do you need to own your building? It is easiest to install solar on a building you own. In some cases, we are able to work with tenants who have roof rights or long-term leases, or generally just strong working relationships with their landlords. We know that that's often the case in Cambridge, so please don't be discouraged by that if that's the case. And feel free to submit an application anyway. Is your condo association eligible to participate? We know that there are a lot of condo associations in Cambridge who might be interested. We typically cannot work with condo associations unless your condo building has a particularly large roof, which would be greater than that 2,500 square foot minimum. Usually we're looking at 7,500 square feet for condos. So if that's the case, we encourage you to sign up. You may be a good fit to host a community shared solar system, for example. But if you don't meet this criteria, feel free to reach out anyway, and we can direct you to other resources. And you may also be wondering, what if your organization doesn't have the money to install solar, despite, should say, this program? So this program is at no cost, comes at no cost to you, and there's no financial commitment required to participate. There's no requirement to install solar, but part of the purpose of this program is to explore a variety of different pathways, including no-cost solar options, so that you are able to go solar regardless of your budget. If you proceed with the ownership route, we can help you apply for grants to cover outstanding costs. And if you proceed with a no-cost option, the system will be installed at no cost to you. And we can talk through all those details and what that would look like. And then here on the last slide, just sharing a link, QR code to the interest form, as well as a link to the website where you can read a bit more about the program and the different installation pathways. And if you want to reach out to us with any questions, feel free to do so at the email listed there. And that's it. I think we'll open up the floor for questions now. Thanks so much for your time.
Great, thank you, Sana. And I think, Madeline, you are gonna field some of the questions that came in through to the Q&A. Is that right?
Yeah, thanks, Lana. Thanks, Brad. Yeah, good to meet you all. My name is Madeline. I'm on the resident team. A few questions have come in over the last few minutes, and one of them I can start with is a great question, a complicated one. The question is, how does the tax credit reimbursement work when a large building has multiple owners and they file taxes separately? So I assume in this case that you might be talking about a residential or commercial condo. And so there are a few different ways that we would approach that. If all of the owners of the building are the same type of entity, being that they either, if they're all sort of tax eligible or they're all nonprofit tax exempt, we would approach it, we'd approach it differently. It is possible to distribute the tax credit as a tax credit as well as via direct pay to multiple owners. We would likely bring in a tax professional to work on that kind of arrangement because there are a lot of implications with how that's set up. But I think what our first approach would be to try and understand how the building ownership currently is set up. If one entity has roof rights, we would look at the electric bill. Does one entity use a much higher electricity usage? And then what kind of interest there is in either owning the solar equally versus doing a, one unit will own 50%, the other 25%. So we would work with you to sort of figure out what that distribution looks like. And then another option would be if you want solar in that building, but don't want to own the solar outright, we could explore a no-cost arrangement, which is very easy to set up to have the annual lease payment go equally to each of the owners of the building, as well as the electricity savings can also go equally to each owner of the building. So the summary of that is that it could be set up a lot of different ways. It is possible, though quite complicated, to set up the tax credit going to different units, but possible. It's something we can explore. And then let's see. And then another question that I'll pass maybe to Sana and Brad is what are the types and sizes of grants available and to what kinds of organizations?
Sure, yeah. So from this state, there are a few grants, including LISP and Solar for All. The sizes and types sort of vary depending on the size of your system. And they have different criteria for how much, what percentage of the system or the project they can cover. So depending on sort of your needs, depending on how much of the system you're able to pay out of pocket and how much needs to be covered by other funding sources, we can help direct you and apply for grants that sort of meet those needs, because they all kind of have different criteria, but there is a good range. If you are looking to get 100% of the project funded, there are some options out there. So we'd be happy to explore those with you. And then I don't know if there are any specific Cambridge opportunities that you wanted to mention, Brad, but I think for the most part, we're connecting organizations to a whole array.
Yeah, there was a program that we announced about a year ago, the Green Equipment for Cambridge Businesses and Nonprofits, ARPA program. We have received a few applicants or applications from folks who were interested in solar that we're still working through. We have recently closed that application as we're evaluating funding. I would still encourage people to check back on the website at some point in the future, because some of these projects just take a long time to scope out to figure out exactly what the budget will be. So we sort of pause things with the intent to give funding to every eligible applicant that's applied so far. And if, as we do work through those, if it does look like we'll still have remaining funding over, we may reopen the application. So it's not a currently live opportunity, but it may come up again in the future, just depending how some of the project sizes and amounts shape up.
Yeah, and I'll add that for nonprofit organizations, there are some grant opportunities through the Cambridge Redevelopment Authority as well.
Great. And another question I'll pass to the panelists. Are facades or parking lot canopies an option?
Yes, they definitely are. Facades we have not done, but parking lot canopies are definitely an option. And we are exploring them right now for the Cambridge Health Alliance, for example, and have done them in the past for other clients across the state. So if you have parking lot space or other green space, we can do ground mounts in addition to parking lot canopies. Facades are, unfortunately, we have not done those, but rooftops definitely.
Another question which I can start to give an initial response to, but I'll probably look to some folks from resident also, is the question about condos and why condos are excluded. And I'll start by saying that they're not excluded, but they typically will need to be, there's a larger minimum size for them to participate, particularly in the hosting option, the community solar hosting option. And that's because ultimately the city is not able to provide any sort of subsidy or direct funding to like an entity like a condo association or any entity due to state law. And so ultimately it has to work out math-wise in terms of like just how the project finances would work. And so the community solar hosting option, regardless of who does it, just requires a larger roof size than the direct ownership model does. And so the reason that's the best is because essentially it just provides a lease payment to the entity, in that case, the condo association. Whereas if you get to actual individuals, individual units or condo owners, it's more complicated to figure out exactly who owns and gets the benefits. If you just own a building and you own the roof, it's a lot easier to engage with. So it's not to say that that can't be worked out, but it's just often a lot more difficult. And I think there's a long history of condo associations in Cambridge trying to and sort of not being able to get across the finish line with it. So again, it's not to say that it's they're excluded, but it's typically more challenging to work with any sort of direct ownership model that a condo association would be owning, and so therefore the community solar hosting option is typically the best option logistically, but it just does require a larger roof than the minimum for some of the other options. So that's just part of that explanation, and I'll defer to resident as well to add any other context just around how the sort of the pricing sort of pencils out from their perspective.
Yeah, I can chime in on that, and yeah, appreciate that answer, Brad. And the only thing I would add is I think when looking at the numbers on a solar array for a condo, I mean, you would need all members of the condo association to agree on what that financing looks like, whether it's an ownership or the no cost option. And just because typically with condos, or at least your sort of classic triple decker, you can maybe fit 8 to 12 kilowatts that are then sort of shared between maybe probably three different condo owners, that it's not a ton of savings per unit. But if you're unsure about the roof space on your building, we'd be happy to take a look at it and can advise on whether it would be a good fit for this program or not, and a better fit for some of the other residential programs. The next question we have here is, after the life cycle of the panel, does the owner need to take into consideration any hazardous waste costs for expired panels?
I think I was on mute, but no, I'm not. But no, the owner does not need to take that into consideration. Typically, the panels are able to remain on the roof past this 25-year life cycle. That's just sort of the life cycle that we reference because that's how long the system is warranted, but they'll continue to produce energy well after that.
Yeah, and I can add that there are no hazardous materials in the solar modules themselves, and that you can, after sometime between 25 and 35 years, when you're ready to either replace your roof or take the modules down, certainly recycle them and dispose of them, appropriately, but there's no hazardous waste in it. Are there any more questions? Feel free to throw them in the Q&A. And that's everything that's there right now, but we'd be happy to take a few more over the next few minutes.
I should also add, I mentioned this in the beginning, but for anyone who joined later, just as a reminder, you're also welcome just to raise your hand, and we can unmute you as well. So if that's easier, we can certainly do that as well, rather than typing a question. But we've certainly had some good questions, so we appreciate all the questions that have been submitted so far as well.
Great, and I see two more just popped in. This question, I am a trustee of a 33-unit condo building that is 100% affordable housing. Are there any grants or funding available for the direct ownership option that would pay for the entire cost?
Yes, so there are some grants that pay for the entire project cost, that cover 100% of the cost. We would have to probably set up a meeting with you to get some more information about the project and see if you qualify. But there are options out there, so we'd be happy to explore those with you.
Yeah, and I can add too that we do a lot of work with multifamily affordable housing. As Sana mentioned, the federal incentives for solar, specifically the ones that benefit affordable housing, are a little bit of a moving target right now, but those could cover potentially up to 50% of the cost. But again, yeah, depending how what the ownership exactly looks like, and how you want to proceed, there are different things we could explore. And then another question, large condo with an 8,000 plus square foot roof. What are the participation limits for roof age with a community solar model? Who covers the maintenance?
That's a great question. And yeah, that's a nice large roof. So for roof age, we typically do not install solar on roofs that are over 10 years old, just because we wouldn't want to risk having to remove the system before that 25-year period for a roof replacement. So that's typically the limit that we set. And with a community model, who does maintenance would depend on who owns the system. But the owner of the system is the party that's responsible for maintenance. And in at least the community solar model that we discussed here, where you would host a system, there would be a third-party financer involved, and they would be responsible for maintenance.
Thanks, Sana. A couple questions here on the tax credit adders. The first one, what types of projects qualify for the 10% domestic content adder? I could take a stab at this because we're just working through domestic content on a couple of projects right now. And projects that qualify for domestic content right now have to have at least 40% of the equipment manufactured in the United States. And we are pursuing this for a few projects. We are able to get domestic modules for some of our sites. As you can probably imagine, domestic modules are flying off the shelf right now. And so how and when those are going to continue to be available is a bit of a moving target. But it is something that we are pursuing and looks feasible. Certainly for canopies where we can also get domestic steel, and for rooftop arrays where we can get domestic modules and racking. And then this next question, if there is a risk that direct pay gets shut down by the Trump administration, is that a timing issue? If you start or finish the installation by a certain date, do you avoid this risk?
Yes, that's a great question. So yeah, while we feel pretty confident that the 30% tax credit will remain in place, there is some uncertainty around direct pay, which is basically the pathway that allows nonprofit organizations to capture that tax credit despite being tax exempt organizations. We are not sure yet what the timing on that will look like, but we feel confident that projects that start this year and invest at least 10% of their costs in the project, this year will basically qualify for what's called safe harbor and therefore guarantee that 30% reimbursement through elective pay, whether or not it remains in place. So the recommendation is to make that 10% investment this year to avoid that risk, though we're not totally sure that it will be the case.
Then we have one more question. Where are the panels sourced from?
Yeah, most of our panels are sourced from China, but as Maddie said, we have also pursued domestic content adders and therefore sourced panels locally.
And in light of a lot of the recent tariffs, we are also a lot of our distributors are getting also a lot of panels from South Korea, Cambodia, and some other countries as well. That may be hit less severely with some of the new tariffs. Another question popped up. Our condominium has 42 units with a large roof that's 17 years old. We plan a roof repair and replacement. Would we qualify for the program after that or not, since the roof is older than 10 years?
That's a good question. Yeah, so if you plan on a roof repair and replacement, then you would certainly qualify for the program. We can do the feasibility analysis before you do the roof replacement so that you know what your options are. And then once you do the roof replacement, we can proceed with the installation. So in either scenario, you would qualify for the program.
Great. Well, I don't see any more questions in the Q&A. So I just want to thank everyone for being here. We had a lot of really great questions. I want to thank Sana, Madeline, and Rachel from Resonant, again, our city's partner in this program, for being here and working with us on this program. As you see on this final slide that's up here, the best ways that we would encourage you to take the next step if you're interested is to fill out the interest form. You can do so by scanning the QR code. You can also visit the program website, where you'll also find more information, but also a link to the program interest form. And you can reach out to Resonant directly about this program at cambridgesolar@resonant.energy. I think every case is a little bit different, so the best way to get the most specific answers relevant to your building is just to fill out that initial interest form and just set up that first consultation or that first call just to share more details and understand what sort of options could be the best fit for your building, and to kind of go from there. So again, we really appreciate everyone being here. The recording of the slide will be posted on the city YouTube page, and we can also send out a follow-up email that it will include the slides and a link to that recording as well, so folks have it on hand and can reference it. So with that, I'd like to say thanks again. We appreciate everyone being here and asking great questions, and we look forward to seeing you engage with the program moving forward. Have a great rest of your afternoon.
Thanks, everyone.